Shall we go there?
Yeah, just be
I'll do it,
careful.
yeah.
Too many things.
Yeah, sure.
Keep it on that, right behind there, and then see if the cord comes. But I don't know whether you have an opening there.
Do you want to have a spare one here?
Oh, you have
चलो गुड
আচ্ছা এইটা আমার ছোট ব্যাগটাতে পুরো দাও
ছোট ব্যাগ মানে ওই পাতলা ব্যাগটা
এখন কিন্তু
চালু হয়ে গেছে এখান থেকে ইউটিউব চালু হয়ে গেছে তুমি যা এবার রিসেট করে দাও বুঝেছো
আমি কিছু করিনি
মানে এখানে যা যা হওয়ার কথা ছিল সব চালু হয়ে গেছে
তো পারফেক্ট
ইউটিউব ফেসবুক সব হচ্ছে
আচ্ছা আমি তাহলে এখান থেকে কিছুই করব না শুধু রেকর্ড করব
তুমি এবার তোমার যা ইচ্ছা
আচ্ছা আচ্ছা বলছি যে আপনাদেরকে আমি জানাচ্ছি বলছেন যে
यहाँ पे बहुत प्रेशर है
I totally understand. I'll be very mindful about it.
Yeah, very careful.
Yeah, just make sure you don't.
You'll come here, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna come there. Once I set the microphone.
From the as far as from the
YouTube and Facebook.
আমি এখন করবো এখন তোমাদের করছি আর কি করবো না তাহলে কি I know that these things should be arranged. Hello.
আচ্ছা বাড়াচ্ছি
কিচ্ছু করতে হবে না
এই দিকটা
Hello. Om Stavakaya cha dharmasya sarvadharmasvarupine avatar varisthaya Ramakrishnaya te namah. We are extremely happy and grateful to Swami Vidyanathananda ji Maharaj, who within very short time have kindly accepted our request to deliver a talk this evening in our San Jose house. I am also grateful to you all who are attending this lecture, that within a very short time I announced it and you have come to attend Swami's lecture this evening. I think it is not required to introduce you Swami Vidyanathananda ji, who is popular as Mohan Maharaj. So the Swami, he is the recipient of very prestigious Bhatnagar award and he got the prize of Infosys. So right now he is staying in our Mumbai center and is associated with Tata. So he came in sabbatical in Canada and he got his PhD from UC Berkeley from mathematics department So he came to see his department and his colleagues and his friends here in Berkeley. From time to time he visits in UC Berkeley because of some academic purpose and for research purpose. So this time also, after a long time, he is visiting UC Berkeley and he will be leaving on Wednesday. He will go to Canada and from there he will fly to India. So however, I am grateful to him that he has kindly, after a long time, he is coming to our San Jose house. So I am very glad that he has kindly accepted our request. So without much ado, I request Mohan Maharaj to deliver his talk on Advaita and Buddhism.
Hello? 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 Yeah. Okay. स्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्मस्वरूपिणे अवतार वरिष्ठाय रामकृष्णाय ते नमः. Revered Prasanatmanji, thank you for this very kind introduction. So, I am not really accustomed to giving talks on spiritual matters. I am much more comfortable giving mathematics talks and doing mathematics. If at all, so the difference I feel is basically because I think essentially when we talk about these things, it's how much of it is guesswork and how much of it is true. These are questions I think as we talk, we should be asking ourselves these questions because, and the point of this topic that we have chosen today, Advaita and Buddhism, is basically because these two traditions, both Advaita and Buddhism, particularly Madhyamika Buddhism, these are based on enquiry, or what is called in Sanskrit jigyasa. So the first sutras of what's called the Brahma Sutras, there are 555 of them. The first sutra says Atha Ato Brahma Jigyasa. Keyword meaning is basically jigyasa. So what does jigyasa mean? In English we usually translate it as enquiry. But literally, this word jigyasa essentially means desire to know. Gya is the Sanskrit dhatu. So and the way it breaks up is gya plus there's this word sun, which plus a. So essentially that's this suffix sun, what it does is it repeats the first one. So that means gya is preceded by ji. So that's actually the same root. What it means is basically, so for example, desire to drink is pipasa. So pa is the dhatu. So and so. So I mean, jigyasa is also, it's formulated, that word is coined that way. Anyway, so the key thing about it, that word, what it means is a desire to know. To know what? To know the truth. But literally, I mean, the derived meaning typically is enquiry. When one wants to know something, one asks questions, and this questioning nature of the mind is often what is colloquially called jigyasa. What is the connection between this root meaning and this derived meaning? Essentially, the thing is Okay, fine. So there is a subjective aspiration for truth, which is the literal meaning of jigyasa, desire to know the truth. How does it manifest itself? And it manifests itself by this process of inquiry, by asking appropriate questions. So the questioning is the means and the aim is to arrive at the truth. So that way, one can actually synthesize the meaning that is there in our day-to-day usage with the root meaning of this word. And so this particular word, jigyasa, and its accompanying method of inquiry, these two things find importance in these two traditions, Advaita and Buddhism. What we'll proceed to do first is actually what I'll be picture. It's basically emphasized that these two are basically the same thing. Yeah? The wording is different, but essentially the Madhyamaka Buddhist approach to truth or inquiry and the Advaita Vedanta approach to truth or inquiry are essentially the same. This is what is being asserted. So I'll first cite those passages for you, and one is from the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, one is from Swamiji's complete, Vivekananda's complete works, one is from the Leela Prasanga, Great Master, etc., etc. And so I'll first state just the passages, and the rest of it is going to be analyzing why is it that these passages emphasize the similarity between these two paths. Okay. So in his lecture, this is one of his Jnana Yoga lectures. So Vivekananda's Jnana Yoga lectures, many of you must have seen this. So one of those lectures is called The Absolute and the Manifestation. Yeah? So in it, Vivekananda says the following: this Advaita, meaning Advaita Vedanta, was never allowed to come to the people, which was supposed to be some kind of an esoteric philosophy meant for a very select few, traditionally. At first, some monks got hold of it and took it to the forests, and so it came to be called the forest philosophy. So that's why you have these Aranyakas which precede the Upanishads. Aranyaka comes from Aranya, which means forest. That's why perhaps the greatest of these, the biggest in volume certainly, of the Upanishads called the Brihat Aranyaka. So that's basically the allusion here, that it's a philosophy that is to be understood, practiced. See, in India, the Indian tradition, philosophy is not something just for intellectual cogitation. It is something that you are supposed to convert into some kind of a practical means of living. And so it's a philosophy that is thought through and lived. And therefore what was basically the tradition at those times is that this is the kind of philosophy, because of its very elevation, because of its sublimity, it's probably difficult, if not impossible, to carry it out in practice in the midst of society as we know it, and therefore people who practiced it took that to the forests. So that's what Vivekananda is talking about here, and took it to the forests, and so it came to be called the forest philosophy. By the mercy of the Lord, the Buddha came and preached it to the masses, and the whole nation became Buddhists. Long after that, when atheists and agnostics had destroyed the nation again, it was found out that Advaita was the only way to save India from materialism. Thus has Advaita twice saved India from materialism. This is from Complete Works, Volume 2, Chapter 6. I'll stress one particular sentence here. This is Vivekananda talking, that Advaita has saved India twice. And the first time is basically by the Buddha, and the second time what he is alluding to is essentially Shankara's Advaita. So here it's worth pointing out that Vivekananda is not talking about Advaita Vedanta as a school of thought as opposed two other schools of thought. Yeah? So if you go to, say, some philosophy class, or if you're go to one of the universities around here, one of the UCs, and essentially go to a South Asian school or a philosophy school, and then there you will see that these two philosophical schools are pitched against each other. Yeah? That they are not the same. Which means that here the point is not the intellectual superstructure or the definitions or the logical structure that build up or that constitute these philosophical schools that is being stressed. What Vivekananda is saying is essentially these are two schools of thought that are literally the Buddhist and what we call Advaita Vedanta. These are the two schools of thought that are literally, as far as their conclusion is concerned, non-dual. Advaita, literally. Yeah? So by Advaita, he does not mean the derived meaning of Advaita Vedanta as a school of thought which is to be taught in a certain way, in a certain class, etc., etc. What he is talking about is the genuine worldview that is non-dual, Advaita, and what he is stressing here is that this particular non-dual worldview is the one thing that is necessary to save us from declaring that only objective reality, what we roughly call matter, is the only is the thing, and our interaction with it. We are separate, the world, this material world is separate, and our interaction is all that there is. This is the crudest form of naive materialism. Yeah? And somebody, there's this famous agnostic philosopher, Bertrand Russell, the British philosopher. So I think it's in one of his essays. It's called Unpopular Essays. Yeah? So somebody had this very sharp British sense of humor. Yeah, so in this Unpopular Essays, in the introduction, I think he writes, naive realism, which is the point of view that things are as they are, lead us to the study of physics, which tells us things are not as they are. Hence, naive realism, if true, is false. Hence, naive realism is false. So this is his he was a logician, mathematician by training, so naturally, plus he dwelt on this. So essentially, this is really the crudest kind of materialism that can be, naive realism in that sense, which really is not a philosophy, it's essentially a worldview of mindlessness, which means refuse to think about various things in any depth. Yeah, that's the attitude that is being countered. That's what is being called materialism here. And he says, what is the counter to it? The counter to it is that this conscious principle by which we inquire, by which we look at the world and gain our knowledge, is the real, if you want to ask fundamental questions like what is true, what is it that gives us joy, then the culminating answer to any of these more fundamental subjective questions has to take us to something that is a non-dual point of view. And not just as an intellectual exercise, it is something that must be packed with a certain amount of power in terms of a lived counterpart. Yeah? Something where that non-dual worldview is actually lived in a day-to-day manner, on a day-to-day basis. And then Vivekananda says, thus has this Advaita twice saved India. First 550 BC and then about 800 AD, 700 plus AD. And referring to basically the Buddha and the subsequent school, and then Advaita Vedanta as we know it today. So this is one assertion. Now we turn to the Great Master, where Swami Sarvadananda describes what was Ramakrishna's attitude towards these two schools of thought. Knowing that, this is a quote from the Great Master, knowing the Master to have been perfected, Master means Ramakrishna, to have been perfected according to all the main religions prevalent in the world, the reader may wonder within himself what his idea about the Buddha was. When the great poet Girish Chandra Ghosh, the highly devout follower of the Master, published his drama Buddha Charita, depicting the divine play of the Buddha, the Master witnessed it staged and said, "It is certain that the Buddha was an incarnation of God. There is no faith," and this is the crucial point here, "there is no difference between the faith founded by him and the Vedic path of knowledge." So what we call Advaita Vedanta and the Vedantic path of enquiry, and the path that was propounded by Buddha himself. What Ramakrishna is saying is that these two are basically the same. Okay. And then Saradanji, the author, comments, "Our conviction is that the Master came to this conclusion through his spiritual insight." And one point which should be noted here, see, in the first case, what Vivekananda is doing is he's in some sense, he's saying that the conclusions of these two paths, the Advaita Vedantic path of inquiry and the Buddhist path, are the same. The goals are the same. What Sri Ramakrishna is talking about here is that the paths, the means towards that, are the same. So not only are the goals the same, which, after Sri Ramakrishna's experimental finding about the goals of various world religions, we more or less accept that whatever be the path, the culminating goal of any spiritual striving is more or less the same across paths. Here, what is being said is not only is the goal the same, the paths too are basically the same. And subsequently, now this is essentially an amplification by Swami Saradananda in this great master. So what Swami Saradananda is doing is that there are differences in semantics in terms of words, not the path, but the way it is described in terms of words, and that creates all the strife. And it's basically because of this difference in words that you have two different departments in various UCs. Otherwise, if one had gotten to the core of the thing, then all this difference, this unnecessary thing, well, maybe some people get a job one way and in one department. That's probably one kind of dubious benefit, but not very much more. So anyway, this is one place where, this is the difference between experimentalists and people who are merely theorizing without any desire whatsoever to experiment or derive some factual content of it. If it's just some theoretical armchair philosophy, that's something rather superficial. What is being talked about here is what does it really mean to us in practice. So as far as that is concerned, then what one has to resolve is only the difference, the linguistic packaging. The language that is used to package one is different from the language that is used to package the other. And therefore, which linguistic concept corresponds to which linguistic concept in the other school, that needs to be clarified and brought forth. And that's what Swami Saradanji is doing here. So he synthesizes in the Buddhist way of thinking, they arrive and they use this word shunya, just as the Vedanta uses the word Brahman. So that's the difference in these two words. But these are words. Suppose somebody decides to call it a wall from tomorrow, and you probe and you are really the conceptual content of what such person means by wall is this, then really it's just some kind of superficial packaging. So you throw it away and get to the core of it. So that's what he is doing here. The ancient seers have called the indivisible non-dual reality the void, shunya, the absence of all existence. And others have called it the all, purna, where all experiences meet. As a matter, I'm quoting this, as a matter of fact, fact meaning observed fact, or perceived, experienced fact, all of them imply the same experience. The reality that has been called by Buddha the void, in which all beings get extinguished, has been described by Shankara as the all, the substratum of them all. The plane of the non-dual consciousness indirectly implied by the words, indirectly implied, this is to be stressed here, indirectly implied by the words void and all, has been described in the Upanishads, the Vedanta, as the state beyond all ideation. Which means essentially, what he is referring to here is this passage from the Upanishads, Yato Vacho, this is from the Taittiriya Upanishad, Yato Vacho Nivartante Aprapya Manasa Saha. So essentially the mind tries to capture within some conceptual framework reality in its deepest sense. What is real? That's the question that people are after here. What is truly real? And they have some criteria, how to evaluate reality. And if you follow the paths of inquiry either in Buddhist method or in Advaitic method, what they are saying is essentially we'll come to that path a little later, but for now let's just say that what the Vedanta emphasizes is aham pratyaya gochara. So basically, the one thing that we cannot doubt at any point of time is our own existence. It is possible, logically or theoretically, that my eyes are playing some tricks, which they do. Our brain actually processes information that we get from the world and projects various things, and that is the knowledge of the world that we have in our heads. So we can doubt that. We have a legitimate ground for saying, okay, these things are not as they are. Essentially challenging the naive realistic viewpoint. But the person who is doubting is oneself. This world might not be, but the doubter has to be. The questioner has to be. The experiencer. Even to doubt one's own experiencing, one has to be there. But it's there in some very confused form, and what exactly is it is what the Vedantic inquiry is about. The Buddhists are empiricists in the sense that they start off with the objective reality. Objective reality is that which is an object of perception, which does not just mean what we call the material world, this laptop, this mic, this room, the walls, not just that, but getting a little more inward, say our perceptions. This is our subjective perceptions, emotions, feelings, thoughts, mental phenomena. These are also objects of our perception. And what the Buddhist way of inquiry does is basically it observes them and asks, are these things real? So that's basically starting off with an empirical point of view. This is what is observed. We are not making any value judgment about whether it's true or false. We're saying this is what we are observing. Get the raw data on the table. That's all. So what's the raw data? The raw data is the world as we perceive it, sensations that we have in our body, emotions, feelings, thoughts, etc. That's the entire data of our existence. Take that as this empirical starting point and then start inquiring. Is there any substance in any of it? And finally, the way it happens is essentially that, look, finally the thing is, there is this I, which is supposed to be, to which we attribute all this experiencing, and the Buddhist inquiry finally asks, is there anything substantial about this I? That's where it leads. Whereas Vedanta is basically formulating this inquiry somewhat differently. He says, okay, fine, the experiencer in all this is something that we cannot doubt, so take that as your starting point and then proceed to ask what is its real nature. We wanted to find reality. We started with an experiencer. but it was some confused notion of experiencing what is the reality behind it. That's all. So once you try to formulate it and put it in some conceptual form, something that you can actually write down and share with others, then you see that the frameworks are slightly different, but the spirit of the inquiry is basically the same. That's what has been emphasized in these three passages. And so there are 2 points really, if you want to summarize this whole discussion, there are 2 points really that are being made. First, this inquiry into reality has this basic answer that reality in its deepest sense is not dualistic, is non-dual, both according to the Buddhist inquiry and according to Advaita. It is referred to in Buddhism as Shunya. It is referred to by Advaitins as Purna or Brahman. First conclusion. Second, this is about the conclusion. Second, the path towards it. What exactly, okay, fine, this is some goal. It could be purely some esoteric theoretical nonsense that would be of no value to anybody who is actually after the truth. So the path towards truth is through inquiry, through this analytical method, which means take up a thing and ask of it what is real about it. This is it. That could be the subjective I, or it could be the objective world or objective sensations, whichever. So this is the conclusion that has been put forward in 3 passages. One, which we just now read out. One is by Vivekananda, and it's one of his complete works, and the other 2 appertain to Sri Ramakrishna's own perceptions. Okay. So now this is essentially conclusions that are from the Ramakrishna Vivekananda literature. But is it something that they are concocting as a figment of their imagination, or does it have support in the traditional literature of these 2 traditions? Yeah? So that's what we'll address next, and essentially what we'll see is basically that both in the Upanishadic literature as well as in the traditional Buddhist literature, these facts are really brought out, except that because people were much too interested in proving that no, my school is better than your school and my way of thinking is better than your way of thinking, which is fundamentally dualistic and therefore is supposed to violate the conclusion of their own school. It's because of this that there was all this kind of conflict which was quite unwarranted. So the next thing to do is essentially bring out from the existing literature some of these sharply non-dualistic statements and see the parallels between them. So first, from the Upanishads. Yeah? So how does one, in the Vedantic literature, sometimes characterizations are given, but sometimes there are passages which are suggestive of both the goal, what one is gunning for, as well as the method. Yeah? And one such statement is from, again, this Brihadaranyaka, says, Sa Esha, this is, Atma is essentially the word that is a placeholder for this first thing that we said, this aham pratyaya gocha. So the aham pratyaya means basically all of us have this conviction, I exist. So now this is called the pratyaya. Pratyaya means this conviction or feeling, whatever. I exist, the content of this. And then aham pratyaya gochara, which means what is it that it is? What is the reality that this experience, the universal experience, all of us feel I am, I do exist. What is it that it is pointing a finger towards? What is the content of this? And how are we going to get there? So this aham pratyaya gochara, whatever it is pointing towards, that essential part of one's existence is referred to by this word Atma. It literally means saravastu, essence. It does not mean some round piece of light hanging around somewhere in the hills, somewhere in the mountains, on top of some trees. It's not something esoteric, not something mystical, but something which is the most tangible thing in our life, namely it is that which flashes in and through every experience, but it is so obvious that we forget to notice it. Yeah? That's what Vedanta is trying to move one's attention to. Yeah? That the most obvious thing is really what the Atman is. Yeah? Except that we cover it up by our thinking, by our conceptual encapsulation. Therefore, we need a method, and just to fight these silly habits of the mind, a method to cut its way through them. And so this is what's there in the Brihadaranyaka. It says, Sa Esha, that, this, yeah, so Esha is this, Sa is that. Yeah. Sa Esha, Neti Neti Atma. And this is one of the most misunderstood passages because it's translated in this completely incomprehensible way. It says, that is not this Atma. It sounds like complete nonsense. Yeah. Whereas actually there is some content to it. So anyway, let's finish this and then we'll come back and try to grasp this. Sa Esha Neti Neti Atma Agrihyo Nahi Grihyate Ashiryo Nahi Shiryate Asango Nahi Sajjate Asito Na Vyathate Na Rishyati. The self is described as not this. It is ungraspable, for it is never grasped. Undecaying, for it never decays. Unattached, for it is never attached. It is without fetters, it feels no pain, nor ever suffers injury. Okay. This is a rough translation, but the key part of it, Sa Esha Neti Neti Atma. Okay. What one is doing here is in these two words, Neti Neti Atma, what one is doing is basically capturing the essence of this process of enquiry. What is it that we do when we enquire? Yeah. See, just imagine in school when we were children, there's some problem that has been assigned to us in class. Yeah? And then we are thinking about it. Suppose that the problem is not a routine problem. Then we start thinking about it. Shall we go this way? Shall we go that way? Let's try this. Let's try that. Oh no, this doesn't work. What happens? What is your mind doing at that stage? It's basically this is something that I've forgotten my key, I don't know where it is, and then is it there, is it there? See, this is this process of enquiry. That's where it's basically asking you to focus. Is it there? Is it so? So this, by this means, this experiencer, this confused notion of an experiencer that we have is what we refer to as the I. And then what we are asking is, what is its essential nature? Yeah? And then we ask, well, is it just this physical body? And then I say, no, that can't quite be the answer to this question. Why? Because there is a point at which I am completely asleep and I am dreaming. At that point of time, I have no direct awareness that I am experiencing various things through this body. So I have manufactured in my head some dream body which is going around either eating something or feeling hungry or drinking something or feeling thirsty, etc., etc. And it seems to be that in that situation there is an experiencer. So it can't quite be, so the answer cannot quite be just this physical body and the senses. What is one really doing? What one is doing is, okay, fine, so we have this notion of an experiencer, but this notion of I as experiencer is a confused notion that we have. So what this inquiry does is it exposes the confusion. Yeah? Otherwise, what would we do? Oh, yeah, I am the experiencer, no, I have no doubts about it. I mean, this is the kind of conviction that terrorists have. Yeah? I mean, that they are doing something very right. Yeah? But it's really this. Yeah? Essentially, not raise a question about one's which basically means that one is not really sincere about this enquiry. So what is it that one is doing here? It's essentially exposing first this confusion, that which we took for granted is being inquired into and is being shown up as something that is that's not entirely substantial, but to a great extent hollow. Yeah? Which means, okay, fine. Then once we have recognized that, yeah, actually that which I was calling the I is just something that with which we did our jobs and we don't really have clarity about it, then what we have done is we've acknowledged the problem. What I was saying facetiously about the terrorist instinct is to de-recognize the problem. And though there is no problem, I am here. What is this I? Oh no, don't worry about it. Stupid fellow. Don't ask such silly questions. Which means basically I don't want to address those questions to myself. Yeah? Why? Because then my own lacuna of understanding, my own lack of understanding will get exposed. And that insecurity is something that instinctively frightens us. So turning one's face away from it is essentially a self-protection mechanism to deal with this insecurity, with this fear. Today morning this question of fear had come up in Berkeley. Somebody had asked Maharaj this question then. Anyway, but at the core of it, it is essentially this. But then once you have recognized it, then the first answer, is it this physical body? No, it's not just this. Is it really the mind? No, the mind keeps changing. What do I really mean by the mind? Is it this thought that is coming up now? No, there's a stream, it's constantly changing. So sometimes I feel happy, sometimes I feel sad, but I never doubt that it is I who am feeling happy and I who am feeling sad. The mind has these qualities of happiness and sadness. It's not quite the mind. Yeah. So what is one really doing? It's basically saying this that we started off with, this referring as referring to the body, this as referring to the mind, this as referring to the sensations, this as referring to thoughts, etc., etc. That which we were after in Vedanta, the real nature of this I, is not just this for any of these things. Yeah? So then, perhaps, now go back and translate that Sa Esha Neti Neti Atma as not just this, not just this. Instead of not this Atma, just put one extra word here. It's not just this, it's not just this, where just refers to this confused way of thinking. Yeah? Then the feeling and the dissatisfaction that is there behind an inquirer in truth, that becomes a little more transparent. It's not going to be captured by words, but at least the words will be more faithful than they used to be. This is the Vedantic method. Is there an analog in the Buddhist literature? So we said that, look, firstly, neither Vivekananda nor Sri Ramakrishna were just talking through their hats. Not that they wore them, but they were not just talking through their hats. So it's really something that is supported in the traditional literature. So here we've quoted something from the Brihadaranyaka. So let me say something from the Buddhist literature. This is supposed to be what's called the Anatta Lakkhana. See, it's what's very surprising. Actually, I did not strike me when I was writing down these notes. See, here the Brihadaranyaka is talking about enquiry into the Atman. Yeah? Sa Esha Neti Neti Atma. This essence of one's being is not just this, not just this. And here, this is the Buddhist thing. This is actually the second sermon that the Buddha gave. It's called the Anatta, because it was not in Sanskrit, it was in Prakrit, Pali. Anatta Lakkhana Sutta. So that which is of the nature of not self. This is from something called the Sanyukta Nikaya. Yeah? It's supposed to be the second, one of the very important discourses of Buddha, and it takes the form of a repeated question and answer. So he's addressing the young monks, bhikkhus. Bhikkhus, form, that which we see, is not self. Feeling is not self. Perception is not self. Determinations are not self. Individual consciousness is not self. This is from the Samyutta Nikaya. Because how do you conceive it? And so he's asking questions. How do you conceive it? Is form permanent or impermanent? Yeah. So basically this chair, it's a form of a chair. And you just fold it, the form has changed. So immediately they answer, impermanent Venerable Son. Now is what is impermanent painful or pleasant? See, there in the Buddhist part of inquiry, what is one seeking? One is seeking satisfaction. So this word dukkha, sarvam dukkham, this is one of the first Arya Satya. And it's again, unfortunate translation, all life is suffering. You ask any of us here, are we suffering? No, not really, we're pretty happy. But then you ask the more fundamental question, and that's what dukkha really means. Are you fully satisfied? I think more or less, most of us will say, no, I'm not fully satisfied. This dissatisfaction, this kernel inchoate, not very precisely identified dissatisfaction that is there, we can start attributing reasons to it. Yeah? But whatever it is, this lack of satisfaction is really what is dukkha. So, if you go into literal derivations, it means dukh is bad, sukh is good in Sanskrit. Kha, that word, it has various meanings. One of the meanings is knowledge. So, bad or unsatisfactory knowledge, dissatisfaction. If you interpret it that way, then sarvam dukkha. In all our experience, we don't have complete, full, satisfactory experience. Yeah? Then Maharaj was talking about today, suppose somebody decides that, if I have huge amount of food every day, I'm going to get satisfied. Well, after some time the stomach will be full. Each extra morsel is going to cause dissatisfaction and pain. Yeah? So that cannot be the source of satisfaction. Yeah? So this is what dukkha is. Okay. So he proceeds. So essentially, because the Buddhists did not have Upanishads to fall back upon. Why? Because there were reasons for it. Essentially, what had happened around, there are always sociological and historical reasons. What had happened was that people had gone completely haywire and had essentially started treating all these sacrifices, catch hold of this animal, kill it, do it in such and such a way. I have this favorite story. There is some particular yagna before which a cat had to be caught, a rope had to be tied around it, one of its throat, and the other end had to be tied to the door. Why? Some skeptical fellow started inquiring. Apparently 50 years back, when the first time that yagna was done, some cat had come and it was disturbing the whole place. So this kind of mindlessness had crept in, and so essentially it was a way of trying to get away from this objective, mechanical way of going about things towards inquiry, and therefore not something is true, not because it is said in some old moth-eaten book or because some elder has told you, but because you have actually started with it, made an honest inquiry into it, and found that there is truth in it which is good both for oneself and for others. This is the thing that this Bahujana Hitaya, Bahujana Sukhaya, which actually is what has been converted into, in some form, by Vivekananda, the motto of our order, Atmanu Mokshartham Jagat Hitaya. That's the twin ideals of the Ramakrishna Mission. This is where he keeps talking about it to his disciple Sharad Chandra Chakravarti. That's where it comes from. So let's get back to this Buddhist Samyutta Nikaya. So form is not self. So is form permanent or impermanent? Impermanent, Venerable Sir. Now he asks the question: is what is impermanent painful or pleasant? Which means, basically what he is asking, this again, it's this strange translations. We are reading from translations without actually getting connotations of those words. What he's asking is, if something is impermanent, is it going to give you permanent satisfaction, or is it going to have an element of dissatisfaction about it? And the answer is obvious. An impermanent thing cannot give you permanent satisfaction. That's it. This is the exact corresponding statement in Vedanta. Anitya is opposed to Nitya, and that cannot be. I mean, anything that is seen, that is visible, that is sensation, is impermanent and hence asat. This is the criterion for truth. Nitya, something that is drishyatvat mithyatvam. This is one of the Vedantic statements. Something that you see and perceive is mithya. We'll come to this word mithya. Again, another word which is very loaded and has been, a lot of stuff has been given about it from memory without actually trying to probe that. But we'll come to that later on. But let's finish this particular passage. So, impermanent. Now, is what is impermanent painful or pleasant? Painful, Venerable Sir. Now, is what is, again Buddha is asking, is what is impermanent, what is painful, since subject to change, fit to be regarded thus? This is mine, this is I, this is myself. So that's it. So basically he says, okay, fine, so you started off with these sensations, now you recognize that it is impermanent. Once you recognize that it is impermanent, you also recognize that it is not going to bring me lasting satisfaction. But then, if you know that it is not going to bring you lasting satisfaction, are you going to keep on holding it with, this is what is essential, this thing that brings dissatisfaction to me is really what is essential to me. So he is making the whole thing obvious and easy to let go one's hold of. So then the answer is given, no, Venerable Sir. So basically making the questioning to a point where the student immediately grasps the obviousness of it. Is feeling permanent? So this was about, what was this? This was about form, that which is seen. Now go a little deeper, something that is more essential to our subjective experience. Is feeling permanent or impermanent? Is perception permanent or impermanent? Or determination, sankalpa, permanent or impermanent? Various, so what the Buddhists did was basically they did a scientific study of the mind. These are various functionings of the mind. And there, what is being done is essentially take up each of these functions of the mind and ask of it, is this what is essential? That's what is being done. Is individual consciousness permanent or impermanent? That's the last question. This is the real place where the philosophies start differing. Why? When Buddhists refer to Atma or consciousness, they refer to this consciousness as reflected in individual mental modifications, vrittis. What the Advaitin does is says basically that you can actually abstract out this consciousness from all these vrittis, and that universal abstraction is what we call consciousness, Chaitanya, etc., etc. At a certain level, it's neither here nor there. The thing is, yes, fine, maybe it's the Buddhist answer to that is, okay, fine, you are doing an abstraction. Can you actually point to it empirically to an experience where you are saying that this consciousness is there without an object? If it is not there, then how come you are talking about it? So essentially what it's doing is basically both these paths are taking you to a point through some logical structure to a point where you can see, okay, fine, beyond this, there's this famous last pair of lines of another very famous philosopher, Wittgenstein. That of which one knows not, one should speak not. That's where it is. It's being taken. Essentially, so it knows not in the literal sense as an object. So one is leading it on there. There's also a nicer way of interpreting it, and particularly in the world we live in, I think that interpretation is probably more practically relevant. Essentially, it's basically saying if you don't know something, don't talk nonsense. That's what it is. Essentially the thing is it's again probing towards a deeper inquiry into various things. So, bhikkhus, any kind of form, whatever, whether past, future or presently arisen, whether gross or subtle, whether in oneself or external, whether inferior or superior, whether far or near, must, with right understanding how it is, be regarded thus: this is not mine, this is not I, this is not myself. This is Anatta Lakkhana Sutra. It's a practical manual on exactly what this Saesha Niti Niti Atma is. If the Upanishad has given a conclusion, what this is doing is spelling that out. Exactly. I mean, if you take the Anartha Lakkhana Sutta, translate from Pali into Sanskrit and put it next to that's the passage from the Upanishads, it will read like a bhashya. Any kind of feeling, whatever, any kind of perception, whatever, any kind of determination, whatever, any kind of individual consciousness, whatever. Because when a noble follower who has heard the truth sees thus, he finds estrangement in form. Basically, he does not recognize form as oneself. He does not get mixed up in it. That confusion, which is what the Vedanta calls the Granthi, between the conscious principle and the unconscious principle, the Chit Jada Granthi. What he's saying is that once that is acknowledged that this is not me, he finds estrangement. That means he recognizes I am not these feelings. He finds estrangement in perception, he finds estrangement in determinations, he finds estrangement in consciousness. Consciousness, he means individuated consciousness. When he finds estrangement, this detachment, what we would call in Vedanta Vairagya, I gets removed from it. Passion fades out, literally. Yeah? Raga is Ranjate iti raga, that's the literal meaning. Yeah? So, Viraga means that which was coloring the mind, yeah? Ranjate iti raga, that is gone. What is that? That's exactly what Viraga, yeah? Negation of raga. So that's what Vairagya is. Yeah? So the coloring of the mind, the limitations of the mind, that this is all there is, that silliness is gone. With the fading of passion, he is liberated. When liberated, there is knowledge that he is liberated. He understands birth is exhausted. The holy life has been lived out. What can be done is done. Of this, there is no more beyond. This is again Anatta Lakkhana Sutra. And this particular passage, the life has been lived out, what can be done is done. Sharp echo of something from this Mundaka. So I will go back to the Vedanta. In this Mundaka Upanishad, there is this passage, beautiful passage. Parikshya lokan karmachitan brahmana nirveda mayat na asti akrita kritena. This is the crucial passage. See, basically, Parikshya lokan. Having examined what I understand, what I have heard of as the world, Pariksha, examining it. Karmachitan, that which is attained through various works. Yeah? In those days, people used to believe in going off to heavens by chopping off a bunch of cows and goats and whatever, and or throwing something or the other into the fire a bunch of times. And so that's work. Yeah? So it's a mechanistic view of life, yeah? Karma Kanda. So Karma Chitan Brahmana, Nirveda Mayat. Nirveda means basically dispassion. Yeah? After having examined it, he says, oh, this is so insubstantial. You are doing some act repeatedly many times, and then you are expecting something permanent out of it. It makes no sense. You do something finitely many times, and you are asking for something that is not finite. How could that be? So anybody with the most elemental form of logical faculty would realize that this is a futile gesture. And then, nasti akrita kritena. That's exactly this. What can be done is done, of this there is no beyond. That's the way the Buddhists put it. What the Vedanta says, nasti akrita. There is nothing left to be done. Nothing that is left undone, nothing that is left to be done. So essentially what one is stressing here is that the conclusions towards which one is going. So these two are sharply parallel to each other is what is being said here. Okay. This is one of these chances one gets because there's this expression. I mean, again, this I just said some time back that I'll come back to this particular expression. See, somehow or the other, the Vedantin talks about Brahma Satya Jagat Mithya. It's roughly what it means is this Sarvam Dukkham, Jagat Mithya. One is talking about causes dissatisfaction. That's a kind of a reaction at the level of feeling. And what the Vedanta is saying is that it does not give satisfaction to the faculty that searches for truths. That is what Mithyatva means. Yeah? Okay. But again, what is our usual translation? The world is false. Yeah, this is how we usually translate it. Yeah? The world is false. If it is false, then really we are leading a real lying life, because everything that we do and act, brush our teeth, have food, etc., all of it is with this instinctive understanding that the world is real. Yeah? So if really we felt that the world is false, then the only solution that would be left to us is to stand there, not do anything, that also is not an option. Yeah? So essentially, you don't have an option, you have no option to do, you don't have an option equally to not do. Yeah? So which means what? You become a vegetable. That's certainly not what Jagat Mithyatva is. Yeah? So what does Mithyatva mean? Yeah, and then this is really, unfortunately what happens again, this is really the problem with various schools of thought which essentially come up with what we call straw man arguments. Yeah? So they pick up some statement in isolation from a particular school of philosophy, interpret it in one's own way, not in the way that it is intended, and say, no, this is the right interpretation. How does one know? Why? Because some people have actually looked at it and gone into it in considerable depth for centuries. But no, I know better because this stupid formulation is something I can counter. Yeah? And then publish some papers and put my stamp on it and essentially declare that no, I have really found out this flaw in this, something that is deep. So that part of it is really a kind of an academic politics. Yeah? It has nothing to do with this inquiry into truth. So if one has to understand it, one has to try to look at it from the point of view of people who have actually put it up. Which means there has to be consistency checks with other expressions of the same thing that is there in that school of thought. Yeah? So when we are talking about Jagat Mithyatva, then when in doubt, go to the root of every word. See, Sanskrit is a very precise language. Yeah? So what does Jagat mean? What is the root of this word Jagat? So that again comes from this verb. Almost all Sanskrit words, except those that have been taken from other languages, they come from roots, what's called dhatu, things which get converted into verbs. Yeah? So here the verb is what's called gam. Again the same, repetition. Yeah? Gam and ja, that's gam, that ga is being repeated. Yeah? So that's this jagat. Yeah? So that which moves, gamyate iti jagat. That which moves, that which changes is what is called Jagat. Yeah? What is it that, so now we will have to come to the word Mithya. Yeah? Forget Mithyatva. So what is it that one is after? Satya. Yeah? So what is Satya is that which is. The word is, the Sanskrit dhatu is what is called as. Yeah? As is that which is, to be, the verb to be. There is, as is dhatu. And that's what gets converted into Sat. Sat means therefore that which is. So then what is the condition, what is the criterion that the Vedantin is using to say that something is Sat, something is true? And the criterion that the Vedantin comes up with is basically something that is permanent, something that is unchanging. And therefore, by definition, something that is changing is not unchanging. That's all it means. Yeah? So Satya is that which does not change. Jagat is by definition something that changes. So that which changes is not something that does not change. That's all. It's a logical tautology almost in that sense. However, there's a slightly different take on this. Myth, the word myth, I mean again, that has also a different connotation. And if you go back to Shankara's first explanation of this Brahma Sutra, there's what's called an introduction. It's called the Adhyasa Bhashya. It says Satya Anrite Mithuni Kritya. Mixing up that which is Satya and Anrita, which is a lie. The real translation of that which is false is Anarita. False in this day-to-day sense. A mixture of that which is false in our day-to-day usage sense, along with this permanent isness. That confusion is at the root of our day-to-day behavior. A little bit of probing is, yeah, that's what it is. We don't have a clear idea of our isness, but we go on doing various things, eating, brushing teeth, bathing, all of that as if it is all real. So this confusion is what is really Mithuni Kritya. So that means having mixed these up or confused them, our behavior proceeds. So when we say Jagat Mithya, what we are really suggesting is, look, admit honestly that our perception of the world has this element of confusion in it. If we are interested in seeking the truth, then this confusion needs to be gotten rid of, which means this confused perception of the world needs to be clarified. By what? By this analytical thinking. What is that? There's again a Sanskrit word for it, that is called Viveka. The root of Vivekananda, that Viveka is analytical thinking. To analyze that which is permanent from that which is impermanent, that which is unclear from that which is true, and then discard that which is we have understood as untrue, as confused. Okay. So I think this is what I wanted to conclude with this whatever one understands of Jagat Mithyatva, because it's somehow or the other we take these things as cliches. On the other hand, what have we been doing for the last 1 hour? We've basically been taking up all these things that all of us have probably heard zillions of times, but then trying to examine it again for ourselves. This process, which is really what one can do at a certain stage, is what is called manana. Thinking about it, revisiting it, and thinking about it with a fresh mind. Okay? Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu Janani Saradang Deving Ramakrishnan Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shatva Pranamami. Oh, of course. If there is time and if people are not bored.
So do you have any question?
Yes.
So can you tell more about that? Buddhists have this stream of consciousness, right?
Yes.
So
Okay.
how does that relate?
Yes. So what is, again, these are frameworks for understanding. So what is it one is doing? So the Buddhists basically say that this is what it's not quite Madhyamika. This is what's called this Kshanika Vijnanavada. So that means what they are saying, and I'll tell you a corresponding Vedantic statement also. So remind me that I should tell you about what is called Anirvachanya Khyati. That's the Advaitans theory of knowledge. Okay. But what about the Buddhist thing? So basically what they are saying is that these perceptions, emotions, cognitions, feelings, thoughts, they pass as a stream. And what is happening is that at each point of time, there is this awareness, okay, at this point of time, I am feeling tired, recognition of this. At this point of time, I am not feeling tired. At this point of time, I am feeling bored of the sound of my own voice, etc., etc. So this stream of cognitions that is flowing, is what the Buddhists call this Kshanika Vijnana or Alata. So basically it's what they say is that this collection of, or what used to be, what is called often in English, stream of consciousness. Yeah. So that these are individualized cognitions. Could be feelings, could be thoughts. Yeah? That is all there is. So there's a law of causality, but one thing follows another, and it gives an impression that there is a contiguous whole. This is the way the Buddhists talk about it. Yeah? What is the corresponding statement in them? This is basically knowledge. Yeah? Buddhist. This is some way of thinking about knowledge of various events. Could be emotions, could be feelings. The Vedantic statement, corresponding statement, which is very similar, is what is called Anirvachanya Khyati. So Khyati is basically, Khyativada is essentially what is the theory of knowledge that you, how do you recognize something is, what are the qualities, what are the determining factors of something as a piece of knowledge. Yeah? And they give these three qualities. Yeah? Avidyak, Tatkal Utpanna, Anirvachanya. Avidyak means, avidya is not knowing. Avidyak means basically that knowledge has been preceded by the absence of knowledge. This is a common sense statement. Before we know something, we don't know it. This is all there is. Avidya, again, this whole, people who read this and memorize it, they think, oh, this avidya is this one dark mass of inchoate ghost which is somehow seated somewhere in my stomach, and from this something or the other comes out. Rubbish. Because if one tries to understand it in these mystical, esoteric terms, they will never be real. Yeah? It will just be some painful thing that one carries along with one's, and it will just be one more piece of avidya, one more piece of lack of understanding. So avidya literally means, and this is how the Advaita talks about it, it's basically that vidya or knowledge is avidya, it comes from non-knowing. So one precondition of knowing is not knowing it, because if you knew it, then you wouldn't be wanting to know it. First, Tatkal Utpanna. It has happened at that instant. Which means if you try to extend this causal chain, this is where the Advaitin has no problem with the Buddhist. He has a problem with the Karmakandin, the Purva Mimamsakas. Basically, he says everything is born in some causal chain. Shankara is very scathing about it. I mean, essentially, you go and bathe in a river 55.5 recurring times, and you're going to get some benefit in some heaven. Yeah? So that's what is being countered. Yeah? So essentially, if that causal chain is broken when you come to the notion of knowledge flashing. So this flash of knowledge of a particular event, yeah, it cannot be caught within this framework of causation. You do such and such, this kind of knowledge is going to come out. It's actually our common sense experience also. Someday we are struggling with a problem and you struggle the whole day, no solution appears. Next day, suddenly without trying it, the solution has come. So it's not some causal chain. What is in our hands is to try. But to say that this trying or whatever, doing such and such is mechanically related to that knowledge flashing is hindering this one acausal nature of knowledge itself. The knowledge is intrinsic to our being. This is the way Vedanta talks about it. So what is it? So avidyak tatkal utpanna. Tatkal utpanna actually breaks this causal chain. And abhinava, it's new. So it's so abhinava or anirvachana. So it's abhinava is that it's new. So every piece of knowledge is new. So it's essentially, now you try to look at that with this Buddhist thing of every moment a piece of knowledge comes up. More or less the same thing is being talked about.
So there was another part about like that chain is there, right? Like the thing that is going, and then they say like
it's alat shan. Alat. That's basically you take a fire.
Cut that chain.
Yeah, no, it's like taking a fire thing and you are whirling it round and round. And though there is a little fire spark at the tip, it gives you the sense that there is a round circle where you all that you really have is the fire at these various locations. This is in this Mandukya Karika. This is called this Alat Shanti, where the Advaitin is actually trying to argue with the with the Buddhist by saying that no, this is an incorrect way of knowledge, after having used basically the Buddhist system of logic. So these are things that one can keep on fighting, but it does not, I don't think it's for aspirants, particularly for people who are interested in going and doing the actual experiment. It's a kind of a pointless exercise. Yes, please.
Buddhists draw a distinction between the concept of rebirth in Buddhism and the doctrine of reincarnation in Hinduism, and the difference is typically they talk about the concept of Atman, and they say, okay, Hinduism or Advaita believes in Atman, whereas we don't. What we are talking about is just Krishna that is propelling this way.
I have no idea about either of these, so I would best not answer it. Yes, I mean, yeah. But really, here's the thing. I mean, the key point of both Advaita and Buddhism is not to get lost in these speculative, theological speculations. So, for example, there is this particular story. So, for example, if you look at the Advaita Vedantic texts, this business of reincarnation is something that is more stressed by the karmakandins. Why? Because you do such and such, you are going to go to a heaven. That's the only reward. I mean, it's a carrot and stick thing. You don't do it, you're going to get a stick. You do this, you're going to get a carrot. Yeah? So, which means, therefore, okay, you're promised something in heaven. And therefore, after that, but you've done only finite amount of stuff, so after that heaven, you're going to come back to this and do it. This is how that doctrine comes about. Yeah? Is it really universal? So the Buddhist basically says, okay, there is this, empirically there is this law of causation. But if you come see, what are you really after? That business is about this physical thing which you are trying to negate. And if the stress is on trying to find in every piece of knowledge that which is acausal, which the devotee calls grace. If grace is something that is, okay, let me just read out one bit. There was something from Vidyanathananda. Yeah. And, let me see. Where is it? Yeah. This is Vivekananda. Yeah. Cast out all causation and realize the Atman. Only freedom can produce true morality. If there were only an endless chain of cause and effect, which is what gets into this reincarnation business. And I want to scrupulously avoid these speculations. Yeah? Nirvana could not be. The goal of finding truth could not be. That part is my subtext. Yeah? It is extinction of the seeming self bound by this chain. This is what constitutes freedom to get beyond causality. So I'm not saying that, I mean, the thing is, there are all these things can come up with all kinds of theories and speculations, and question is it really important? I mean, essentially, as far as I'm concerned, it's something like asking, is there a 10-eyed horse on the Andromeda galaxy? Why would I be bothered about it? So it's essentially, the point of all this is to look at that which is valuable. The response that you have to some deep music, is it causal? If your mood is bad, you won't have the same reaction. To a sunset, there's some acausal flash. In every fundamental scientific discovery, in every fundamental artistic insight, that acausality is there. That's what is being sought. Vedanta says, pratibodha viditam vatam. It's not only in all these, but in and through every act of cognition, that acausal thing is there. Hunt for it there. Not this causal chain of reincarnation and whatever nonsense.
What is Maya?
What does that have to do with what I was talking about? See, I would suggest, the best thing to do would be, Vivekananda has these 3 lectures on Maya. And he has given both instances. Roughly speaking, it's essentially this confusion between polar opposites, good and bad, life and death, joy and sorrow. All our existence is a mixture of these polar opposites. That is what I mean.
All right, I have just one question. That is, just as you have lucidly given the comparative analysis and both the things. Now actually when you were working, you see, you were as a mission, how you are, taking at your hearts, how you are intimating in your work, these two.
Oh, very simple. So there is actually, okay, and then this is a very simple answer to that. Essentially, either one is devotionally inclined, or one is oriented towards work, or one is oriented towards knowledge, truth. And there are three answers to this, and they mean the same thing. The Christians who take the devotional point of view say practice of the presence of God. The Buddhists who do not have a theological construct say mindfulness. And Vivekananda, who is basically in modern times Karma Yoga, the work as a part of, as a spiritual discipline, just do whatever you are doing with fullest possible attention. Means the same thing. That's it. Whatever one is doing, as far as work is concerned, if one is devotionally inclined, try to practice the presence of God in and through that, or devote full attention to the work, or be aware fully. That's it.
In each case, you have to relate the thing.
Whichever is your temperament at that point of time, practicing, that is the answer. This is it. This is what it translates to in practice. It's not something esoteric, not something complicated.
Exactly. I'm just.
Yeah, that's it. So doing whatever. So for example, this is what Vivekananda's answer is. Whatever you're doing, if you are drinking water, drink water with full attention. That's it.
Thank you very much for beautifully relating these two things, Advaita and Buddhism. These are completely opposite if we see it from instantly. We can find these theories are just opposite to each other, but beautifully Mohan Maharaj concluded those things. These are not just opposite of each other, but there are similarities. And actually Sri Ramakrishna also echoed that. Sri Ramakrishna also said that there are similarities. However, I just remind the question, what is Maya? In London lecture, Swami Vivekananda said, you are asking this question, that is Maya, and I am delivering this, that is also Maya. So know it, what we are seeing, what we are learning, everything is Maya. Try to get rid of that. That is the point. Thank you very much for your participation in this beautiful evening and obviously excellent lecture. So we shall do the Brahmarpanam here, and then the prasad will be served here. I would request you, but before conclude, we have few announcements here. The first announcement is 4th of July, Thursday, we have whole day spiritual retreat in Berkeley, and 6 Swamis will be participating, 2 from San Francisco, 2 from Sacramento, 1 from St. Petersburg, means the Florida. So 6 Swamis will be there. There will be the spiritual songs, there will be meditation, there will be offering of flowers. So the whole day retreat. I would request you to participate 4th of July. There will be a meditation workshop in July 27th and 28th. So you have to register through online, but those who have already attended, I request them not to register. Those who have not attended, please register, those who are interested obviously. So we have a very limited space, so almost we are filled up, so little bit is left, so those who are interested can register through our website. So these are the few announcements we had, but one great announcement is just waiting. we shall announce that on 4th of July. Who will be attending there? They can first listen to this. Thank you very much once again for your participation. And I convey my thanks and gratitude to Vidyanathananda ji Maharaj, Mohan Maharaj, for accepting our invitation and deliver this excellent talk. Thank you. Let us do the Ambar and then we shall go, and please sit here. Our volunteer will serve food here. Om Brahmarpanam Brahmavi Brahmagno Brahmanahutam Brahmaevate Navantavyam Brahmakarma Samadhina Hari Om. Let us read this thing. I cannot see from here. The reflection is there. So, O Lord, please accept our offering. Bless us, make us pure and all-loving. May you not accuse, demand or complain, but love, respect and cooperate with all. May we not find fault with others, but try to find our own faults. May we not treat others as strangers, but learn to make all our own.